Have you ever felt like history is more than just dates and events? Like there's a hidden thread weaving it all together, a pattern so powerful, yet so obscured that it could change the way you see the world? Imagine uncovering truths that were never meant to see the light of day, patterns that repeat over and over, shaping nations, empires, and even the lives we live today. What if I told you the rise and fall of civilizations, the revolutions, the breakthroughs, they're not random? They're part of a recurring cycle that some of the most powerful forces in history never wanted us to understand. Today we're diving into the hidden pattern of history they don't want you to know. In this video, you'll discover the secrets of suppressed events, patterns that show history repeating itself in uncanny ways, and the untold stories that challenge everything we thought we knew. By the end of this journey, you'll see how these hidden threads connect the past to the present and even point toward the future. But why should you watch till the end? Because this isn't just about history. It's about unlocking the tools to see the world differently. It's about finding meaning in the chaos, understanding why the same mistakes keep happening, and, most importantly, how we can break free from the cycle. Stick with me, because I'll reveal examples you've probably never heard of. From civilizations that vanished overnight to revolutions that weren't as spontaneous as they seemed, and economic collapses that followed eerily similar patterns, it's all connected. And trust me, some of what you're about to learn might just leave you questioning everything. Welcome to Rise Theory, where we connect the dots and challenge the status quo. If this sounds like your kind of deep dive, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of our explorations. Together, let's rise above the noise and see the bigger picture. Now let's unravel this mystery. Before we talk about the hidden patterns that shape our world, let's first understand an idea that's been at the heart of human history for centuries: historical recurrence. At its core, this concept suggests that history isn't just a collection of random, unrelated events. Instead, it's a series of cycles, with similar events repeating over and over again, like echoes across time. This isn't just speculation. It's a pattern you can trace if you know where to look. Think about it. Wars, revolutions, economic crises, even the rise and fall of empires, they often share eerie similarities, regardless of when or where they occur. Some historians and philosophers have argued that these repetitions are driven by human nature itself. People tend to respond to challenges in predictable ways, whether it's a quest for power, a fight for freedom, or a reaction to scarcity. The result? Events that feel new in the moment are often strikingly similar to those from the past. Let's dive into some examples. One of the clearest cases of historical recurrence is the rise and fall of empires. Take the Roman Empire, for instance. At its peak, Rome was the center of the known world, a symbol of power, culture, and innovation. But over time, internal corruption, economic inequality, and external pressures led to its collapse. Sound familiar? Many historians have drawn parallels between Rome and later powers, such as the British Empire, which experienced a similar arc of expansion, dominance, and eventual decline. And it doesn't stop there. Think about the United States today. Some argue that it too follows a pattern seen in past empires. Political division, economic strain, and challenges from rising powers on the global stage all echo the stories of previous civilizations. Is it destiny? Or are we simply repeating the same mistakes? Another fascinating example is revolutions. Look at the French Revolution of 1789. It began as a movement to overthrow an oppressive monarchy and bring equality to the people. But what followed? Chaos, a reign of terror, and eventually the rise of a new authoritarian leader, Napoleon Bonaparte. Fast forward to the Russian Revolution of 1917, and the similarities are striking. The people overthrew the Tsar, but instead of achieving the utopia they envisioned, they endured years of turmoil and the rise of a totalitarian regime under Stalin. These revolutions, separated by more than a century, follow an almost identical script: hope, upheaval, and the replacement of one form of oppression with another. Economic crises are another area where history seems to repeat itself. Take the Great Depression of the 1930s. It was marked by widespread unemployment, financial collapse, and massive societal change. Now compare it to the global financial crisis of 2008. Both events were triggered by speculative bubbles. In one case, the stock market, and in the other, the housing market. And both left millions of people struggling while governments scrambled to find solutions. Despite the technological and societal advancements made between those two events, the underlying human behaviors, greed, fear, and overconfidence, remain the same. Even natural disasters and pandemics follow recurring patterns in history. Consider the Black Death in the 14th century, which wiped out a significant portion of Europe's population. The fear, social upheaval, and economic consequences it caused were unparalleled at the time. Yet when the Spanish flu hit in 1918, centuries later, the responses were remarkably similar. Quarantine, fear of the unknown, and waves of misinformation. And now, in our modern era, the COVID-19 pandemic echoed many of these same challenges, showing that even with advanced technology, the human reaction to crises remains deeply rooted in familiar patterns. But historical recurrence isn't just about grand events. It can also be seen in cultural and intellectual movements. Take the Renaissance of the 14th to 17th centuries, a time of incredible artistic and scientific innovation, often viewed as a rebirth of classical knowledge from ancient Greece and Rome. Later, the Enlightenment of the 18th century echoed many of the same themes, with a renewed focus on reason, science, and individual rights. In both cases, humanity sought to break free from the constraints of its time and embrace progress. And yet, in both eras, that progress was followed by periods of backlash and resistance, as new ideas clashed with traditional ways of thinking. Even war, one of the most devastating aspects of human history, seems to follow predictable cycles. Look at the 20th century. The Treaty of Versailles, which ended World War I, was meant to secure peace. Instead, its harsh terms sowed the seeds for World War II. It's a pattern seen time and again, unresolved conflicts leading to larger, more devastating wars. And when you study military history, you'll notice recurring tactics, strategies, and even motivations that span centuries. The reasons may change, resources, religion, or ideology, but the underlying patterns remain constant. So why does this happen? One explanation lies in the cyclical nature of power. As new generations come of age, they often reject the values and decisions of their predecessors, seeking to carve their own path. This leads to a kind of pendulum effect, where societies swing from one extreme to another, peace to war, prosperity to crisis, and back again. The historian Arnold Toynbee described this as challenge and response, where civilizations face crises, adapt to survive, and then grow complacent, setting the stage for the next challenge. Another perspective comes from the idea of collective memory, or perhaps more accurately, collective forgetfulness. As time passes, societies tend to forget the lessons of the past, repeating the same mistakes because the consequences feel distant or irrelevant. It's why financial bubbles keep forming, why political systems keep faltering, and why the warnings of history often go unheeded. But here's the twist. Not all repetitions are identical. The details change. Influenced by culture, technology, and circumstance, what stays the same is the underlying structure. The rise, the fall, the reaction, and the renewal. This is what makes historical recurrence so compelling. It's not just about what happened before. It's about recognizing how the past can inform the present, and many times over. As we peel back the layers of history, it becomes clear that these patterns aren't just coincidences. They're part of a deeper story, one that reveals both the potential and the limitations of human nature. And while it's tempting to view recurrence as inevitable, some argue that recognizing these patterns gives us a chance to break free, to learn from the past and create a different future. But that's a conversation for another time. History as we know it isn't just a record of what happened. It's a story shaped by what's told and perhaps more importantly, what's not told. Throughout time, significant events have been deliberately suppressed or downplayed, lost to time or hidden by design. These omissions create gaps in our collective memory, altering how we understand the past and how it influences the present. Consider the Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921. For decades, it was almost entirely erased from textbooks and public discourse. In one of the wealthiest black communities in America, violence erupted, destroying businesses, homes, and lives. Yet this devastating event was buried, leaving generations unaware of the injustice. Why? Because acknowledging it would have challenged the narrative of racial progress that many sought to promote. The suppression of such events doesn't just rob us of facts. It reshapes our understanding of what's possible and what needs to change. The same can be said for the partition of India in 1947. While it's recognized as a monumental event that shaped South Asia, the scale of human suffering, millions displaced, hundreds of thousands killed, is often glossed over. The power structures of the time prioritized the political narrative of independence over the human cost of division, and this suppression has left scars that continue to affect the region's politics and relationships today. But who decides what's worth remembering? This brings us to the role of power structures in shaping history. Those in power have always had a hand in crafting historical narratives to serve their agendas. Consider the way colonization has been portrayed in many Western histories. For years, textbooks glorified explorers and empires, framing their expansion as a civilizing mission. The darker realities, genocide, exploitation, and cultural erasure, were minimized or ignored. Why? Because it's easier to maintain power when the stories people hear paint their leaders as heroes rather than oppressors. Selective history isn't limited to textbooks. Think about the monuments we build and the holidays we celebrate. They're symbols, yes, but they're also choices. Choices about what we remember and what we forget. For instance, the narrative of Christopher Columbus as a brave explorer persists in some places, despite growing awareness of the destruction he brought to indigenous peoples. These choices aren't accidental. They reflect the priorities of those in control. Power also shapes the recording of social and political movements. Throughout history, uprisings have followed strikingly similar patterns. Oppression leads to resistance, resistance leads to reform or revolution, and revolution often brings its own set of challenges. The civil rights movements in the United States, South Africa, and India are separated by geography and context but share common themes: a fight against systemic oppression, the use of nonviolent resistance, and eventual progress that often feels incomplete. Yet these movements are rarely presented as part of a larger pattern. Instead, they're taught as isolated events, disconnected from one another. Why? Because understanding the broader pattern would empower people to recognize injustice and organize against it more effectively. The same forces that suppress certain events also work to obscure these patterns, making it harder for future generations to learn from the past. Economic cycles offer another clear example of historical patterns. Booms and busts aren't new phenomena, they're as old as commerce itself. Take the tulip mania of the 17th century, often cited as one of the first recorded economic bubbles. Speculation drove the price of tulip bulbs to absurd heights before the market collapsed. Sound familiar? The housing bubble of 2008 followed a similar trajectory, as did the dot-com bubble of the late 1990s. These cycles often stem from the same root causes: greed, overconfidence, and the illusion that this time will be different. What's striking is how little we seem to learn. Despite centuries of evidence, economies continue to fall into the same traps. And it's not just about money. These collapses have real human costs, from lost jobs to shattered lives. Recognizing the recurring nature of these patterns could help us prepare better or even avoid them altogether. Cultural and artistic expressions also reveal fascinating historical patterns. Look at the Renaissance, a rebirth of classical art and thought inspired by ancient Greece and Rome. Centuries later, the Romantic period emerged, rejecting the rationality of the Enlightenment and embracing emotion and nature. These shifts weren't random. They were reactions to the times, reflections of the collective psyche. Today, we see similar cycles. Minimalism, for example, often surges in response to periods of excess. After the bold, extravagant styles of the 1980s, the 1990s embraced a more subdued aesthetic. Now, as we navigate an age of digital overload, there's a renewed interest in simplicity and mindfulness. These cultural patterns remind us that art isn't just about expression, it's a mirror reflecting societal shifts. Technology, too, follows patterns. The invention of the printing press in the 15th century revolutionized the spread of knowledge, just as the internet did centuries later. Both sparked societal upheaval, challenging existing power structures and reshaping how people connect and communicate. But technological advancements often come with recurring challenges. When machines replaced manual labor during the Industrial Revolution, it led to widespread unemployment and social unrest. Today, artificial intelligence is causing similar fears as automation threatens jobs across industries. The specifics may change, but the underlying questions, how do we adapt, who benefits, and who gets left behind, remain the same. Now, and then there's the environment. Throughout history, natural disasters have shaped civilizations in profound ways. The eruption of Mount Vesuvius buried Pompeii in ash, freezing a moment in time, but also altering the region's history. Centuries later, the Dust Bowl of the 1930s displaced millions of Americans, reshaping migration patterns and agricultural practices. What's striking is how often we fail to heed these warnings. Climate events like the Little Ice Age in the 17th century caused famines and social upheaval, yet similar environmental challenges today are met with resistance to change. The recurring impact of nature on human history is a stark reminder of our vulnerability and our resilience. When you step back and look at these patterns of suppression, power, social movements, economic cycles, culture, technology, and the environment, a picture begins to emerge. It's not just about individual events, it's about the threads that connect them. These threads weave a tapestry of history that's far richer and more complex than the stories we're often told. And as we dig deeper, the question isn't just what these patterns reveal about the past, it's what they mean for the future. History isn't just a collection of dates and events, it's a living, breathing story filled with patterns that connect us to the past and guide us into the future. Recognizing these hidden patterns allows us to see beyond the surface, to understand why civilizations rise and fall, why revolutions succeed or falter, and why the same challenges keep reappearing in new forms. By questioning established narratives and seeking out the untold stories, we gain the tools to think critically and challenge the status quo. We uncover not just what happened, but why it happened, and how those lessons can help us shape a better tomorrow. The patterns of history aren't just echoes of the past. They're maps to understanding the present and navigating the future. If this journey into the hidden threads of history has inspired you, let's keep exploring together. Don't forget to like this video, share it with others who love uncovering new ideas, and subscribe to Rise Theory for more deep dives into the stories that shape our world. Thanks for watching, and remember, every pattern tells a story. Let's keep uncovering them.